Hello and welcome to our extra lesson today, smoothing out skin tones and layers, glazes that might look blotchy. So glad to have you here. Can you guys see me here okay? Just give me a thumbs up or an emoji. I'm just going to check the video here and hop around to the other side, make sure you guys can all see me. Okay, great. We've got Marcia online, Mary online, nice to see you. So just like the last live lesson I did, I have my iPhone precariously hanging by a wire. That's how this video is being done. Gotta love technology, but I'm thankful I have an iPhone. I think it gives the best video quality, at least for Facebook Live. And then I also have this lesson being recorded with my camcorder behind the phone. And I'm going to post that video later on. I think I'll upload that to my YouTube channel, email it out to you guys so you can see a little higher quality version. If you're registered for the challenge, you'll get that notification. So I got to make sure I'm looking at the camera though, because the camera lens is in a different spot here for my iPhone. But hope you guys are doing well. So if you see behind me, I have a portrait that I did. I did that this morning in about an hour. So just sketched it freehand and quickly roughed it in using semi-opaque glazes, way thicker than what I would normally do. And just trying to get the effect of some blotchy glazes, some skin tones that are maybe a little bit too vibrant, a little too reddish, a little too orange. I'm going to step back here and just see how it looks on the screen. I think you can see it, and it shows that off pretty well. And we have Rena. Rena says, "Hi Matt, sorry too late here to join in the live session." That's okay. There will be a recording. It's going to be in the Facebook group here. You can check it out in the announcements section and the video section. So it will live here in the Facebook group, but plus you will get that video as well. If you're registered, I'll email it to you, the higher quality, higher resolution version, because I think this one records at like 360p instead of 720p or 1080i, and that's just a low quality. Anyway, got a lot of people here. Sharon, Emily, good to see you all. Okay, I have to switch here back behind the camera. So what I'm going to do some demonstration here, show you how to correct blotchy skin tones, glazes that are a little rough, or we might say blotchy glazes, and skin tones that are just out of whack. Whatever. You know what we're here for. So first of all, I am just so impressed with the quality of the portraits in this group. Again, can I just commend you for that? I mean, just the fact that you've been investing your time here in the middle of a quarantine. You know, you could be watching Netflix, you could be watching the news all day and getting freaked out by the reports that are coming out. And yes, it's scary out there, and yes, there's a lot of truth to it. But what you dwell on tends to change who you are. And when you say, you know what, I'm going to do something productive, I'm going to create something beautiful that's going to be of a benefit to me and to others. It's going to help me feel better, but it's also going to encourage others when I develop my portrait painting skills, and I can paint a portrait for a loved one and make it look like them and give it to them as a gift. I mean, that's just commendable. And again, I want to just say hats off to you for that. You guys have done a great job. So many great portraits in the group. People, that just got their first commission while doing this portrait, and somebody sees them working on it and they say, "Hey, can you paint a portrait of, my loved one?" And all of a sudden they're in business. It's pretty cool. There's a lady that said this brought her out of depression. She was in depression, and just by doing this, focusing on something else that's beneficial and creative and productive, it's brought her out of depression. I mean, that's powerful. I mean, not only are we producing excellent artwork, but people's lives in many ways are being changed, and you guys are a part of this. We couldn't do this challenge without you. I mean, if you weren't all doing this challenge, it would just be me painting a portrait by myself, and that wouldn't be a lot of fun. So I just, again, thank you for being a part of this challenge. And the reason you're here, though, is because some of you have been experiencing some challenges, and go figure. I mean, we're in a portrait painting challenge. We're going to have challenges, and that's a given. Nothing's wrong with you. It's just part of growing as an artist. I've been painting portraits for over 20 years, and there's times I still wonder, am I going to be able to pull this one off? Am I going to be able to fix this? There's that little voice in my head that's saying, maybe this will be the one that you can't finish well. And I have to keep fighting that voice and saying, no, God has anointed me, God has helped me to paint portraits, He's given me a gift, and if I ask Him for help, if I stick with it, if I don't give up, I'm gonna be able to finish this portrait. It's gonna work out. And so you have to kind of ignore that voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough or you're really messing this up. And no, instead have a voice in your head, you know, that says you can do it. I can do this. Like for me, I would say I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I'm gonna finish this well. This might look messed up right now, but if I just put enough time into it, if I really study that reference photo, it's gonna work out. And you know, even if you finish the portrait and it's not your best work, you're like, I could do better than this. That's okay. Don't throw that one in the garbage. Save it, keep it, learn from it, and then take that desire to do a better portrait into your next portrait. Okay, your next project. Say, I'm going to pivot from this one. I'm going to look at some of the mistakes I made, and I'm going to improve for the next one I do. But now, again, you're here for this portrait. You want to make this example portrait, this one of Larry, the guy with the hat, your best portrait. And I understand that. So I want to help you. Even though I think some of you are being hard on yourselves, I understand, you know, you have some blotchy glazes and some of the skin tones are a little reddish, a little orange. And it takes some time to learn that technique, the glazing technique. But here we have this portrait, and I'm gonna look at the comments quick. I'm gonna give you a chance just to comment on this. Let me know, is this portrait here blotchy enough? Are the glazes red enough in some spots for me to use this as an example to teach you with? Let me know right now in the comments here, and I'm gonna check back in just a moment. And while you're leaving comments, I'm going to get a quick sip of water just so my voice holds out. Okay, I'm going to check the comments here and see. Wendy says yes. Maggie says yes. I'm not going to scroll down. I'm just going to see them as they pop up. Mary says yes, should be fine. Michael says yes. Yeah, I mean, I could make them more blotchy than this, and I think, like if you saw it in person, it's actually, the camera makes it look a little better. Let's see. Patty says yes, blotchy and red enough. Sharon says yes. Karen says perfect. Good, good. Kathy says yes. All right, so looks like enough of you say it looks blotchy. I'm going to hold up the actual portrait I'm working on next to this or in front of it so you can see the difference. Okay, you can see the difference between the two. And I think that makes it more overt, more obvious. So I'm going to dive in here. Let's see. First off, I want to show you. Well, let me before I start actually demonstrating, let me clarify one thing, okay? Somebody posted a comment in this group, and I don't think I'm going to be able to quote it exactly, but the quote was something like this. It was, color gets the credit, but it's actually values that does the work behind the scenes. All right, just think about that. Color gets all of the credit, but it's really the value, the tonal values that does the work behind the scenes. Okay, so a lot of times you think, man, the skin tones are off, the color is off, but many times it's not the color so much, it's actually the placement of the values, and it's having areas that are too dark where they should be light, or areas that are too light where they should be darker. And I've done some critiques for my students. You know, I do that within Realistic Acrylic All Access membership. We have a lot of fun doing personal critiques, one-to-one videos. And some of the students that I've done critiques for, they said, man, the skin tones look just so blotchy, and it's, you know, they're frustrated with it and they want to give up on their painting. But what it was is that they didn't have the values locked in the dark spots. You know, like the eyes weren't dark enough, the areas between the teeth and the mouth weren't dark enough, and after they darken those values, suddenly the skin tones didn't look so blotchy, or they didn't look chalky. They just had the right vibrance because it had the dark values to set them off, you know, to give it that contrast, that kind of point of reference, I guess you could say. So make sure when you're working on your portrait that your skin tones problem is not a values problem. It could be that you don't have the hat dark enough, you don't have the eyes dark enough, or these shadows here in the nose and teeth, or the shadows by the shirt. Just double check your values first before you really think it might be skin tones. Now, if you do have those values locked in, you got your dark values where they should be. And by the way, I did include the value checker tool, that you can print off. You've probably seen it before. It's got a chart with different colors and different values, like 4 or 5 different scales. Cool colors, warm colors, you can download it, print it off. It's in the welcome kit. So if you go to the registration page where you signed up, and I have it at the PS on the bottom of almost every email I've sent, almost every email for the past couple weeks, go in there, download that value checker tool, okay, and that'll help you to lock in your values, where you can compare it next to your reference photo and then also to your painting, and make sure that your values are similar. Because if you think it's a skin tones issue and it's not, and it's actually values, you could be putting in work that you don't need to. But let's assume you have your values in place, all right? Let's assume you have your values in place, and we're going to start diving in here with the demonstration, and I'll show you. And let me just ask a quick blessing on this class before I get into the meat of it, because I want to make sure I do this well for you guys. So really quick, I'm going to pray. Father, bless this class. Help me to be able to demonstrate well how to improve blotchy skin tones, glazes that are off. Lord, that the students would be encouraged to continue with their portraits, and I would be able to teach this well, Lord, that they would understand how to fix these problem areas. Lord, I pray that you would ease any frustration they have while they're painting. Give them perfect peace, direct their brush strokes, and I pray you bless this class in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, now I'm going to dive in here, and I'm going to show you the first technique for changing skin tones, for altering or fixing skin tones. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments right now as those questions pop into your head, because I'll look at them later when we're done with the demonstration. So make sure you write your questions in right now as you're thinking of them. Okay, so one method for correcting skin tones, okay, that are off. And in this case, because I advise you guys to use organic red-orange or pyral red-orange for some of the warmer areas in his skin tones, and it's something that, you know, it's good to use, but you have to use it very, very lightly. And I know it's easy when you're first starting off to use too much of the pigment and it gets out of control. But in this case, because we have red-orange, and we're looking at areas that are too orange, too red, we have to think of the complementary color to fix it, okay? And if you remember maybe from high school art classes, maybe you haven't had many art classes before. I don't know what your experience is. Some of you I do, but a lot of you I don't know what your experience is with art. But on the color wheel, you have, you know, your primary colors, yellow, blue, and red, and then you have combinations, secondary colors you can make by mixing those colors together. You know, for example, you mix blue and yellow, you get what? Green, right? You mix red and yellow, you get orange. You mix blue and red, you get purple. Now, I can't show you, I can't create a wheel right now, but just visualize it. You have colors that are opposite on the color wheel, and when you mix them together, they make brown, okay? So you mix red and green together, they make brown. You mix blue and orange together, they make brown. You mix purple and yellow together, they make brown. And so the way to correct colors that are off, if you have colors that are too red, is to add something somewhat greenish. Now you wouldn't want to just go and grab green off your palette. I don't actually have green. I use phthalo blue and mix it with Indian yellow to make green. But if I just mixed those two together and I made like a green on my palette and just slapped it up here, it would look terrible. And you know that. You know it would look terrible. And the reason it would look so bad is because that green maybe would cancel out these areas that are very bright in pigment. But then you'd have some areas that have less pigment on them, less of the reddish glaze, and they're actually a more correct color. And that green would go over this, and it might fix that up, although it probably would be way too strong. But once it goes over the areas that are lighter in value, that have less layers on them, or less of the red, less of the orange, all of a sudden this would look very, very green, because you're not getting that compounded effect of the red plus the green. And that's how the glazing technique works. I mean, it's like stained glass windows stacked up on top of each other, where you get the light shining through all those different layers, and you're not only seeing the layer on top, you're seeing the layer beneath the layer on top, then the layer beneath that layer, and so on and so forth. So we can't just use green to cancel it out. Now if we have some areas that are orange, we're going to want something more of a blue, but again, if we just slap blue on here, it's going to look terrible. So what we want to do is make something a bit more subdued, or we can go with a very, very light glaze, and that's probably a better approach. So this is going to be technique number one, method number one for correcting skin tones that are off. And I tell you what, I'm going to actually take a little bit of blue. I'm going to take ultramarine blue. Okay, this is a little strange maybe, but if we go very, very light, and I mean very, very light. Now can you guys see this? Okay, I have the ultramarine blue on my palette here. And there's areas here that are a little bit red. So I have to analyze how red is it, how orange is it. It's kind of a mixture between red and orange. So for the orange I would want blue, but for the red I'd want green. So I need to mix just a little bit of Indian yellow into this, so it's just slightly green. Now this is a less intense green. I could have used phthalo blue, but that is such a strong pigment. That would probably overpower it. But the ultramarine blue is not quite as strong of a pigment. And then when we mix that with Indian yellow, we're getting kind of a subdued green. And let's see here. Let's grab my white card so you can see what it looks like. There. Okay. You can see the color. So it's not a super vivid green, but it's kind of a bluish green. All right, and it's not super chromatically intense. Maybe a grayish bluish green. I'm going to really mute that down with some matte medium. And when in doubt, test on your canvas. Get yourself a rag. You can dampen that down with some water so you can wipe it away. Wipe it away if you don't like it. Make sure, this is step number one, make sure your painting is dry first before you do this. Give it a chance to dry. Walk away for a half an hour. Put it out in the sunlight. Use a blow dryer, whatever. But make sure it's very dry. Okay? And that way you can wipe this off with a damp rag. You won't mess anything up if you don't like it. But let's go over this glaze and see what happens. Now, I'm going to show you here as I go over this area that has less of the pigment. It's going to affect that area more than this because that doesn't have as many layers, and it's a little more, or a little less opaque, I should say. It's lighter in value. I actually have to make this glaze just a little bit more robust, a little bit more opaque. So the ratio we're looking at, maybe about, you start with 95% medium to 5% paint. I would just rather have you be on the safe side, and then you can always make it like 90% medium, 10% paint, and so on if you need to. We can go on top of this, and we can cancel that out to some degree. Now the only thing to keep in mind when you do this is you are going to darken the overall value, because we're adding a glaze on top of a glaze, so we're not only changing the color, but we're also changing the value to some degree. So it is going to get a little darker. So it would be good to use this technique in an area where your values are not already too dark. I'm going to just increase the effect here so you can really see it. I'm going to show you the palette, what I'm doing on the palette, and get a little more ultramarine blue. Let's wipe off. Have a rag nearby that's just full of paint that you can use to wipe your brush off. If you have too much pigment on your brush, wipe it off. I have a rag right here, you might be able to see it, it's just full of paint. And I'd have it right below my canvas, and if I have too much paint on the brush, I wipe it off, then I go back to my palette, and that's a real nice way of controlling the mixture. Alright, so let's just make this a little darker. And I'm just going to apply it right in the area in question. Now it's already started to set up, so it's going to get a little blotchy, but let's add it down here to the neck. You'll see that it will cancel out that color to some degree. And it's gonna shift it so it's not quite so intense. But the only issue with this is unless you have your canvas really full of layers and you've got a good amount of layers in the lighter areas, it's not going to look the best. Because if you have some areas that are too light in value or too blotchy, you're going to end up seeing the areas that don't have so many layers on them, and that color is going to be just sticking out like a sore thumb. Now let me know if this is making sense at this point. You can just give me a yes, this is making sense. Because I just want to know if I'm teaching this to you guys properly, and the only way I know really is getting feedback from you. But you can see the difference, okay, and it is muting that down. But again, this technique is going to work well if you have a lot of layers on. Overall your values are pretty accurate, but your colors are just off by a fairly small amount. So this technique again would be used for that purpose. I'm going to check really quick and just see if there's any feedback so I can know if I'm teaching this correctly. I'm going to step behind the phone. Makes sense. Yes, makes sense for sure. Karen says, Trudy says, yes. Okay. Maggie says, no, could you repeat that last part? Last part. Maggie, I'm not sure what the last part is that I said. Maybe it was about whether this technique would work. Okay, let me repeat that last part. So this technique, method number one for adjusting skin tones that are off, will work only if overall your values are in place. If your values are in place, you have plenty of layers on your canvas, your glazes are not really blotchy, okay, for the most part your surface of the skin looks smooth. It's just that the colors are a little too reddish or whatever. It could be the opposite. I mean, in a different painting they might be too blue, and then you'd have to use more of an orangish glaze to counteract that. But for most people it tends to be they're too reddish, too orangish, too yellowish. But again, just to say, method number one, using this, and I haven't coined a term for it yet, maybe I will later, but using the more transparent technique, we'll call it that. This method here for correcting skin tones is going to work when your glazes overall are fairly smooth, your values are in place, you have plenty of layers on the canvas. Alright, so let me know if that makes sense. Bobby says, I think mine is too dark. Is there any way to fix this? Yeah, so I'm going to show you another method for that. Ruth is here. Good to see Ruth. Charlene says I cannot hear. Guys, let me know. Are you able to hear the audio okay? If you can hear the audio, give me a thumbs up, or yes, say I can hear the audio. Let me know, please. I'm just checking here to see if you guys can hear the audio. Probably should have checked that first. I get a thumbs up here. I can hear you, Wendy says, good. Steve says yes. Okay, somebody said they couldn't hear, so Whoever that was, you might want to check your own computer settings, turn the speaker up on your computer or on your phone, and it's probably that. Okay, audio is great. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, I'm going to get a quick sip of water here. And I'm going to ask you again, did this, were you able to see the difference with the glaze I applied? If you could see the difference with this glaze I applied, if you could tell how it muted down the red, tell me, yes, I saw the difference, or something like that. Diane says audio is too low. Now, I don't know if I turn this, I wonder if this makes a difference if I turn it up on my phone. I just turned the audio up on my phone, and I don't know if that changes the recording. Guys, can you hear the audio better now? Can you hear the audio better? Okay, Sharon says, I can see the difference. Wendy says, I saw the difference. Steve says, yes, I saw the difference. Jamie says, I saw the difference. So, and Deb asks, Matt, is the mic volume up all the way on your phone? I just turned it up here. I think it's good. Can you guys hear me now? I'm gonna stand over here by the canvas. If you can hear me, say I can hear you. If it's good. And keep in mind, I also have the camcorder recording this as well. So if you can't hear me well in this, there will be another version that I think the audio and video will be a little clearer. So it's louder when you're facing the phone. Okay, when you turn to paint, it goes too low. All right, I'm going to make sure to speak a little louder as I'm painting, and hopefully the recorded version will be better. I'm not sure how to correct it at this point because I have the I have my speaker turned up all the way. Okay, volume is better when you turned it up, Veronica said. Okay, good, good, good. All right. Apologize for that audio issue, but I think you're able to see the gist of what I did. And now let's do step number 2, or I should say method number 2. Let me do this first. I'm going to blow dry this really quick. It's going to maybe be loud, but I got to blow dry this to make sure it's all dry. And as I blow dry this, that'll make sure that as I do the next layer, it won't be an issue. All right, that should be just about dry enough to work on. And again, I apologize if you can't hear me well, but I'm going to try to speak a little bit louder, and also as I'm here at the canvas. So now let me show you technique number 2 for smoothing out the glazes, and also adjusting skin tones that are off all at the same time. So this is kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And like I said, the first technique will be just for when you're off by a little bit and you want to adjust the area. Basically, you can go over your whole face, or you could go over just the area in question. But this is going to be when you're dramatically off. And in this particular method, you're going to have to go semi-opaque. There's just no way around it, because a lot of you are saying, you know, the areas have gotten too dark. And if they've gotten too dark, really the only thing you can do then, well, first, before you say they're too dark, get that value checker tool. Okay, get the value checker tool that I mentioned, print that off, and double check your values against your reference photo and your painting, because it could be that you think they're too dark, but you don't actually have your other values dark enough. If you don't have the black of the hat, I mean like as black as you can go with many layers of ultramarine blue, raw umber dark, or raw umber, and alizarin crimson, and you got that hat. If you don't have it black enough, then everything else could look too dark, but it might not be. So double check and make sure, if you think it's too dark, that maybe it's not, it just looks that way. Because values are all relative, tonal values are all relative, and they're based on seeing other values next to other values. Okay, but let's assume you really do have it too dark and you need to lighten it up, and it's just blotchy, you want to smooth it out. So here we're going to, let's see, I'm gonna use a size 14, and this is gonna be like a half inch flat. I think that's what this is. Just double check that. Yeah, it's just a little larger than a half inch flat. And we're going to start smoothing some areas out. So what I want to do is I want to look for a color that matches the color in question. Okay, it's going to match the color in question, and it's also going to be just a bit lighter than that, and it should be somewhat close to the color that's next to it, or the tone that's next to it. So in this case, this is quite dark, this area is a lot lighter. We want something to kind of bridge the gap between the two. And I'm going to start with raw sienna, because raw sienna is a very opaque pigment. Some pigments are more transparent. Indian yellow, for example, is transparent. Alizarin crimson is transparent. So if you were to apply it without matte medium, you'd be able to see through it. So that is a semi-transparent pigment, but this one here, raw sienna, yellow ochre would be another, but we don't have it here. Raw sienna is an opaque pigment, so it's very good for smoothing things out. Very good, but you have to make sure you don't use it on areas that are light in value, or you're going to get more of the light shining through it, and it's going to get too orange. And plus you have to mix it with something else. So in this case, I'm going to mix it with a little bit of raw umber dark, and raw umber would work too, because when you mix raw umber dark with raw sienna, you're getting something similar to raw umber anyway. I'm going to have to see if I can buy some raw umber so I can paint with the same exact things that everybody else paints with. Okay, so we're mixing just tiny bits. Can you guys see this okay? I want to make sure it's on the camera. And let's see. Now if I apply this as it is, it's going to be really dramatic, the difference, and it's going to get green really fast. Just by comparison of what we had up there, because this was so red, that's going to start looking almost green. Now if you have any questions, go ahead and write them in the comments. I will go back and check the questions. I can't get to all of them now, but go ahead and write them in. So again, here we have kind of a raw sienna color. Let's mix a little bit of titanium white, because we're going to have to make this somewhat opaque to cover. That's how you're going to smooth this out. Alright, so we started with raw sienna, added a little bit of raw umber or raw umber dark, and now we're adding a bit of titanium white. I'll show you this on my white card so you can see it. That's what we have. Paint on top of something, you can see through it a little bit because there is some matte medium mixed into it, but it's definitely not translucent enough. I need more matte medium, but just to show you what the color is. Okay, so you can see that color as opposed to the other color we had too. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit more titanium white, because I want to, and you're probably wondering, how do you know how much to add? Now that is experience. Okay, it is experience just from painting many times, but what you'll need to do is test it, and you'll need to paint on top and just see, okay, is it a little bit lighter than what I have right now? And if it is, that's good. It probably needs to get a little bit lighter yet, because acrylic paint, as you know by now if you've worked with it, dries darker than how it looks when it's wet. I mean, acrylic paint is like latex house paint. It's just a higher quality version. And you know, when you paint your walls with latex house paint, they look darker after they dry. Well, it's the same thing with acrylic, so you have to keep that in mind. The glazing technique does minimize that effect, but if you're going more opaque, you're going to get that effect of it getting a lot darker than it should be. So I'm going to add a little more titanium white, and here I'm mostly concerned about the value at this point. I started with a base, a color that should work well. Now that is significantly lighter. I'm going to wipe it off. And I'm going to need to add something now to get this color closer to what we have. Okay, because I have raw sienna in there, I have titanium white in there, and raw sienna is kind of an opaque color, so it shifts away from that reddish orange. But when I add that titanium white, it really is going to shift away from the vibrance of the red-orange color, okay, because it just, it's white, and white is more of a cool color. It reflects light rather than absorb it. So because of that titanium white and the effect of it cooling down, making the color less warm, less vibrant, I'm going to have to add something now to warm it up again and get it close to this, but still different enough that it does subdue that orangish color down. Okay, so I'm going to add, let's see, a little bit of organic red orange, or pyrrole red orange, just a bit. I want you to see the difference, and I'm just adding the tiniest bit here. Just going back into this mixture. And I'm pulling from this dab. I grabbed a dab on my palette, wiped it off, and then I'm putting it back into the mixture again. Now, I can test it here and see what I have. Now I'm getting something that's a little closer. But what I want to do is make it more translucent. So I'm going to take some matte medium, just kind of scoop it away from this big glob I have here. And I'm going to add it to the side of this mixture that I just mixed, and I'm going to slowly introduce it in so I can control the mixture. This is really important because how you mix on your palette does make a big difference. So you always want to be able to control the mixture by not just mixing everything at once, but adding a little bit at a time and just introduce it in. Now you could also just go ahead and squirt some fresh matte medium right by where you're working. I do that too because a lot of times the matte medium starts to get thick and it dries and it's not as easy to work with after it gets tacky. So if you can add little bits of fresh matte medium all the time, that really does help. It makes the paint more fluid, it makes it easier to brush, and it gives you just a bit more working time. So now I'm going to add this here and just kind of see what happens, just test it out. And we're going over this and we're just basically kind of smoothing out this layer. Now I'm going to bridge the gap. I'm going to go on top of this other layer. So I'm exceeding the original line. I had that glaze kind of stop off right there. But I'm going to go right on top of it. And I'm going to go into this area that's a little lighter. Now one of the things you'll notice when you do this particular method for smoothing out blotchy glazes, is if you have any areas that are dark in value, like for example this wrinkle, this accessory jugal fold that we have, if you have any areas that are dark in value, you're going to end up creating kind of a muddy look because you have this. I'll just show you here really quick and I'll wipe it off. You have the dark value of his eyeball. If I go on top of it, what happens is that color, it changes. It looks almost kind of bluish, greenish, and that's not what we want. So you're going to have to keep in mind that your really dark values as you go over with this semi-opaque glaze. And it is going to be semi-opaque. We're talking like, you know, 50% paint, 50% medium, something like that. And I'll just show you quick what it looks like on the white card compared to the one before I diluted it. So that's the difference between the two. This is when it was more opaque. This is when I added more medium to dilute it down. Okay, just so you can see that and note that. But again, sorry for all the bunny trails. I'm just trying to share all this knowledge with you that I can. I want you guys to really be benefited by this. So, but as you go over these dark areas, it's going to get muddy. It's just a given. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to come back on top of those darker values and strengthen them again. You'll have to go back on top of them and get rid of the muddy effect and just redefine those details. And that happens all the time. Like, this isn't even just when you're making mistakes. Like, this is just a part of the process. So when I'm doing a portrait, I'll go over with a smoothing layer. That's what I call this. I call it a smoothing layer. And if you have taken my Paint Your First Amazing Acrylic Portrait course, you're aware of that. I have that in one of the lessons called smoothing layers. And it's just one of the steps in painting a portrait with this technique. As you get towards the end, you do start adding more opaque pigment with your glazes. You're going to add a little bit of titanium white, a little bit of raw sienna, and it's going to allow you then to smooth out some of that roughness of the glazing technique, but it's still translucent enough that you're seeing the layers beneath it, and you still have that really rich effect of all the glazes working synergistically together. But it does provide you a way to smooth it out, because that's just one of the side effects of glazing, is you do get that rough texture, especially with a canvas. So again, I'll have a portrait and I'll end up going over it several times. Like, I'll smooth out an area, maybe I'll smooth out something on top of the eyes, although this would not be the color for that. But I go up over the eyes, then I'll have to come back in and I'm going to have to redefine some of the details on the eyes. And that's why you really want to get those details for the eyes and facial features more towards the end of your portrait, so you don't have to keep redefining. It's towards the end that you add those finishing touches and really bring it alive. But that's just to give you an idea there. Now, I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to add a couple more smoothing layers to this section here. And for this section, I want something a little darker in value. So I'm going to take that original glaze that I had, the smoothing glaze, and I'm going to add just a bit of raw umber dark. So again, just on the corner of my brush. I mean, just the smallest little amount. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just a tiny amount on the edge of my brush. And I just wipe it off here and work it in. I'm going to work it in to this glaze. If you grab too much on your brush, no worries, just wipe it off on a rag, like I have this rag below my canvas. And I want this glaze to be a little bit darker, because I look in the reference photo and I see, yep, the values around the eye are in fact a bit darker. Now I'm going to pull a little bit of organic red orange into the mix, because I don't want that glaze to be so different in color that it starts to look green because of the predominance of the red around it. I want it to be just a little bit different. And because it has a bit of titanium white and raw sienna in it, the opacity in it, those opaque pigments are going to start to fix everything up, and it's going to start to smooth it out. So I'm going to add on top of this right around the eye, and you know, like I said, it is actually making that dark area a little bit too light, but I'll have to go back on top and smooth that out later. Now, this lesson here is kind of something I've never done before, so if it seems just a little bit maybe scatterbrained or not quite as logically arranged as you would like, I hope to do this lesson again and get my thinking on this a little more clarified, and because I know this is a thing that artists really struggle with, and I want this to really make sense for you. I'm going to take a bit of burnt sienna and add it to the glaze. is burnt sienna. Now you could get burnt sienna by mixing raw sienna and maybe a little bit of naphthyl crimson and pyrrole red orange. And you could use cadmium red orange as well. But burnt sienna, if you just don't want to mix those colors together and you just want to grab it from your palette, that's okay to do that too. So I want to go over this and make the glaze just a bit darker. I don't want to really affect the color of the eye as much. And I'm trying to paint around it, but you do have to kind of go up over it a little bit, or you'll have areas that don't have color on them and they look a little awkward. We're just going to kind of smooth this out. And let's go over here, we're going to smooth this out. I'm going to go on top of the ear a little bit. And by the way, I'm not going to be able to make this portrait look amazing during this class, during this lesson right here I should say. It's just something like this would take it would take a few hours. It would really take a few hours to pull together. But more of what I want to do is just show you the technique. I'm brushing very light and I'm using brush strokes in many different directions. And again, I'm going over the dark values and the light values to bridge the gap between the two. Here I want something a little lighter down there. And I'm going to take a little bit of titanium white, add that to the mix with a little bit of raw sienna. And again, titanium white is cooler in tone, so when I mix it to raw sienna, it's going to, should give me about the right color. A little more titanium white. Okay. A little more titanium white. Really trying to lift this palette up so you can see it. And I want to go over this area right here, kind of smooth this out. And I have to put that in the right place. I don't want to bring this glaze into this mixture or it's going to get muddy. It's going to start looking gray because you have that titanium white reacting with the dark value underneath. So that would not be the appropriate color. I just wanted to show you that. I'm just bringing it right up into the lighter area and up to the edge of the other glaze. And then if I still have some of that glaze left, I can wipe off my brush and the rag below my canvas. If I have some of that other color available on my palette, which would be good if I did, but I don't really have much, then I can go over and kind of bridge the gap by going on top of that glaze that I just did. Now so I'm using the color, okay, I'm using the mix that I made, the glaze I made for this section right here, and I'm going on top of it. That already dried, by the way, but I had some of that left on my palette. I'm going on top of that with the same exact color that I used here, but I'm just putting it right on the edge and I'm blending the two together. You see that? Now again, I went over this dark area here. I'll have to restore that. That's okay. But I'm just going over that, and that's how you can really blend the two together. And I can still see the glazes underneath. So let the glazing technique be your friend, not your enemy, I guess. Let it be a servant to you and not a master. That's what I was going for. That's what I wanted to say. Let the glazing technique be a servant, not a master. So a lot of artists, you know, they're doing the glazing technique and they think, well, now I can't do anything opaque. It all has to be like watercolor. It has to be transparent, translucent. And if I made it too dark, now what? No, it's okay. You can do some opaque layers on top of areas that were glazed and still get the benefit of the glazing technique. And again, the benefits of the glazing technique, there's many of them, but the fact that you can do a sketch that's detailed and slowly transform that sketch into a painting by adding those very, very light incremental layers, slowly steering your painting down the path of being a fantastic portrait, getting those values locked in at the onset of the painting, and preserving the detail of your sketch. Whereas if you went opaque right away, you'd obliterate the details of your sketch, and that's really frustrating. So what I'm trying to say is you can use the glazing technique, but if you want to go opaque in some areas to correct things, or semi-opaque, because you're going to have some matte medium added in so the paint stays fluid, so you don't add a lot of globby texture to your canvas. But you can do that. You can add these semi-opaque glazes. It can be a little opaque at the end, and that's okay. It's actually part of the technique. It's the way I do it. So anyway, I'm going to see at this point. Now I haven't had a chance to go over everything in it, but we smoothed out some areas. You can kind of see the effect of that. I'm going to just go over and restore this area that got a little chalky, and then I'm going, excuse me, I'm going to take some questions. So I'm going to use this smaller flat edge brush for that. This is a size 8 flat. And I'm going to take some burnt sienna. It's a nice rich color. And I'm just going to add that right up in here, a little burnt sienna. And a little bit of raw umber dark. And let's just take a tiny bit of pyrrole orange, red orange. Let's go on top of this, and we can start to restore the chalkiness, or cover over that chalkiness that occurred when I went over with the glaze. It doesn't take too long to do that. And you can actually use it to kind of blend out a little bit. And we can go over this area here that got a little chalky as well. And I could go back into the eye, but I'll need a darker color for that, so we're going to take raw umber dark, ultramarine blue, mix them up over here with just a bit of alizarin crimson to make that darker. I'll take a little of that burnt sienna mix just to make it somewhat more opaque. It does help it to cover a bit faster. And when you're doing the detailed areas, by the way, it is better to get usually a little more opaque. The glazes work best for the larger areas. Now we're just going to restore that. And I could come in with some more nuances on top of it and really really get that fixed up. But again, that takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, and I don't want this class to go too long for you guys. But I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to get a quick sip of water. If you have any questions, go ahead and write them in. I'm going to check them really quick, and I'm going to take the camera. I'm going to take the camera off of the makeshift tripod I have here, and I'm going to take your questions at this point. All right, taking the phone down, and I'm going to switch it so you can see my lovely face, and we're going to do some questions and answers here. All right. Okay, so what do we have here? You guys probably got a glimpse of my very, very messy studio. I have like a bunch of different projects going on. That's just kind of how I roll. I want to see if we have some questions that have popped up here. I just got to quick spray my palette so it doesn't dry out. There we are. Okay, any questions? I'm going to scroll through here. Mostly looking at audio issues. Okay, I'm going to scroll down and see if the questions are lower on the screen. And okay, Brenda says, I gave a question about value. I accidentally painted the darker area on the left side too low and into where the white area is. Can I fix it? Yeah, so Brenda, what you'd want to do, I'm not sure what the darker area on the left side, if that refers to like his neck area or hat, but basically you're just going to want to take some titanium white, and you're going to want to mix that with maybe raw umber, raw sienna, whatever color you need to do to match the color in question, the large area, the white area. Match that color, mix a bit of matte medium just to thin out the paint. Not to make it translucent, but just to thin it out. And then go on top of that dark area, cover it up. Just cover it up just like you would normally with painting. It might take a couple of layers, but that's how you would do it. Okay, Patty says, I like the white card idea, it helps more. Yeah, I just thought that would help you guys to see the glazes and really see what they look like. It's hard to see them on a foil palette, but on that white card you can really see it. And even on the canvas it's hard to see because you have all the other glazes interfering. Diane says, using the white card to show what color you've mixed is really helpful. could be replicated at all mixes. Yeah, I probably can't do it for every mix, but I'll try to do it for several. Just because I mix so much. I'm always going back to the palette and refining the mixture. But for the main mixtures, I'm going to try to do that. Jeannie says, some of what you're sharing really hits home because learning through experience and trying to correct my own mistakes. Thank you for confirming that my corrections are moving in the right direction. Awesome, awesome, Jeannie. I'm glad that that helps you, and I'm glad that you're doing it intuitively yourself. Sharon says, Matt, what is holding your tablet in place? Yeah, so I'm going to just take a couple moments to answer your question. What I've got is palette holder. Now if you go to realisticacrylic.com in painting classes, or just go to courses.realisticacrylic.com, courses.realisticacrylic.com, that's where I have all my painting courses. I have a free course called Make Your Own Reference Photo Holder, okay, and it's a free course. You can sign up for it, and I show you step by step how to just use cardboard, this cardboard that you have around your house, where you cut it in a certain way, tape it together, and you can pin it to your easel. Now I have a board behind here. This was actually a bulletin board. You could use any kind of a board. It works well to have a bulletin board because I'm using thumbtacks literally to hold this in place, plus some tape. But you could use tape to hold it or something else, maybe screw it in. You might have to be a little creative. But yeah, you can make this reference photo holder by going to courses.realisticacrylic.com and looking for that course. It's right there in the lineup on the page. Okay, let's switch around. And what do we got? Emily, how do you lighten up an area that's really too dark, like up near the hat shadow towards the hair? Yeah, so just to answer that question, first of all, I had somebody else in the group that said she made that shadow too dark. And I said respectfully, I'd have to disagree with you. I don't think you made it too dark. The shadow that's coming down from the hat, if you look at it, it really is almost as dark as his hat. Let's look at this quick. Now, it could be my Kindle, it could be just the way this photo is reproducing here, but look at this value. Look how dark that is. Okay, even if this Kindle is overblowing it a little bit, it's enhancing the contrast too much. How many of you would be happy if you made it look like this Kindle? All right now, if you made your portrait look like this, even if it isn't exactly true to life, how many of you would be happy? I know I would. I'd be happy. But you can see here that this value, this shadow under the hat, is just as black as the hat itself. It's just as dark. You guys see that? Okay, so really you might think it's too dark, but it might not be. It might not be too dark. So double check, Emily and anybody else, double check and make sure that you don't have the hat too light. Maybe the hat needs to be darkened more. Add a few more glazes to the hat. Now if in fact you did make it too dark, well then you're going to mix raw umber dark, or raw umber if that's what you have, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and you're going to match the shadow that you currently have. You're going to match opaquely by testing it, just like I showed you, having that wet rag, putting a little bit on there, testing it, and you're going to see, first of all, match the color that you currently have, and then you're going to go a little bit lighter. Now you're not going to add titanium white to a really dark value. That's for mid-tone values. That's for areas that are, if you have a scale between black and white, it's kind of that gray that's in between. That's where you're going to add titanium white. But on the really dark values, okay, that are close to black, don't add titanium white or it's going to look chalky, it's going to look gray. Instead, add a little bit of raw sienna. Raw sienna has that opacity to it. It's opaque enough that it's going to cover over, it's going to lighten up your area in question. But you're going to have to add something to counteract the yellowness of that raw sienna, which would be ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. And how much do you add of each? You'll have to test it and see. but probably a little more alizarin crimson, a little less ultramarine blue. But you just kind of test back and forth until you have the color right, and it should be just a little lighter than what you have. You glaze it on top, make it 50-50 matte medium to paint, and that should fix it up. Hope that helps, Emily. All right. Rod says, yes, I'm finding this helpful too. Deb says, is there a technique for applying glaze to small areas? For me, it seems to make a glob or snail trail instead of sticking smoothly. Deb, I'm not sure. You know, when I glaze, it seems to apply very, very well. So make sure you're using the right materials. I don't know what you have. Liquitex is a good medium. If you're not using matte medium, you're using a glazing medium, a gloss medium, a gel medium, anything else, or different brands, you might not get the same results. And for that, it's going to be harder to work with. I use Nova Color. It's fantastic. It's just the right consistency. And I know not everyone can get Nova Color because of where you live, and we have the quarantine, and I think they might still be shut down. They're not taking orders. But once they're back in business, and if you live in the United States, use Nova Color. It is the best for this technique. But Liquitex would be my next recommendation. I even think you could use the basics. You know, the heavy body, yeah, it's a little higher quality pigment, but the thickness of that paint is going to make it hard to mix with matte medium. You have to stir it a lot to cut down that buttery texture. So that's the only thing I could tell you right now, Deb. I'm going to check and see with you later. If you want to shoot me a message, maybe we can clarify your question further. Patty says, loving this, learning so much. Leanne says, in these last couple of lessons I began to see that many of the details can be formed by glazes at the end rather than the beginning. What are the best things to capture in the sketch, and what can wait? Not sure about that question. If you're saying you'd want to go more opaque, if you're wanting to go more opaque in the beginning and glaze at the end on top. Some people do that. There's artists that do a grisaille technique. I'm not going to teach that, and I think I've mentioned why I prefer the glazing technique to grisaille, because if you're using black and white, you know, you have to then go opaque to get rid of the gray and make it vibrant again. So Leanne, I'm not quite sure exactly what your question is. You might want to clarify that. I'm sorry. Shoot me a message later and I'll see if I can answer that in more detail for you. Marcia says he has a video on his website, how to make a holder for the tablet. Thank you. Christine, great lesson. Okay. Thank you for all the kind words. I'm just kind of looking for questions right now. Deb says, is there a technique for applying glaze to small areas? For me, it seems to be making a glaze. Oh, I don't know. I saw that twice for some reason. Diane says, this is helpful. Thanks. Oh, Emily says, I made the dark area too large. Okay, got it. Well, let's clarify that. So yeah, if you made it too large, Emily, you're going to want to mix a color, mix a glaze that's halfway in between the dark value and the area that's light, that's next to it. Okay, so you can basically find, just by trial and error and, you know, wiping it off, you're going to mix the same thing I told you, but this time you're going to go a little lighter. You might add some titanium white, a little bit of titanium white, but more raw sienna, and then that alizarin crimson or organic red orange, depending on where it is, because underneath his hat, if we look at it, I'm just going to see if I can pivot quick here. Underneath his hat, we've got this really warm area, right? Where it's very dark, but then all of a sudden it's like very kind of bright red orange. I'm going to try not to move this camera so you can see it. But it is very, very bright red orange in that spot. So at that point there, you have to be careful. So there, you're going to want to mix some organic red orange in there, pyrrole red orange, cadmium red orange, same thing. I mean, it's not the same thing, but it'll work. And that's how you're going to bridge the gap between those two things. So it should be lighter than the black and darker than the lightest value around it. and that should bridge the two together. Arthur says, question, do you make a color swatch for your portraits, Matt? No, I don't. Maybe some people do, but with the glazing technique, I think just, you know, out of experience of doing portraits for a long time, I don't find that as helpful. I just basically analyze the colors on the reference photo before I start, and then I look at my palette and see what colors approximately will get those colors applied. But I do start off very simple. I start off basically with cool and warm, so I'll usually try to hit the darker values first, like raw umber dark, and get those dark shadows, and then come in with the mid-tone and then work my way towards the highlights. Okay, Emily says, thanks, I made the dark area too broad. Good, I hope that helps, Emily. If not, message me later and maybe I can help you further. Oh, Mary says Nova is taking orders again. Fantastic. She said, I just ordered some. Great, because I'm going to be getting low with matte medium pretty soon here. So that's good to know. All right. Marcia ordered some. Just seeing if there's any questions. Thank you for all these comments here, guys. Okay. Trudy asks, when some small bits are a bit rough because the medium dried too quick, how to get that smooth again? Okay, now Trudy, are you talking about the texture? Like if you were to rub the canvas, it literally, you know, is just, it's rough, like you can feel the texture? Because if that's the case, you can scrape it off with your fingernail very carefully. I've done that. Like when you get those little pieces of paint that are dried in there. Is that answering your question? I think it is, because it looks like you gave me a thumbs up right by your question, so hopefully that does it. But if it's like a visual texture, it's not, visually it looks rough, then you use that last technique I showed you, the smoothing layer, to smooth it out. Deb says, thank you, I thought you might have skipped me by accident. Good, I'm glad I got that, Deb. And Jeannie says, I'm so glad you chose to make these additional videos with tips that are gained through your experience. And she's talking about Nova Color. Great, well I'm glad Nova Color is back in business. Okay, any other questions? Malika asks, I have a few different glazes on my palette and use them as it seems like on the picture cool or warm. Is that okay? Yep, I can see your question. I'm just trying to make sure I understand it before I answer. I have a few different glazes on my palette and use them as it seems like on the picture cool or warm. Yeah, I mean you definitely want to differentiate between cool and warm tones on your painting. That is something more that you do in the beginning process, where you're saying, okay, overall this part of the face is cool, overall this part of the face is warm. You start with the glazing technique very simple. You work from simple to complex. So we start very light, and we get the forms blocked in very simply, and we add more and more nuances, more little pockets of shading, like that metaphor a couple lessons ago when I talked about nations and states, seeing those different shapes of values and identifying them and putting them in the right spot. That's super important. But as you get towards the end of the painting, you don't want to just say, is this cool and is this warm? You really want to discern the color temperature exactly. Like, okay, you say, yes, this is warm, but is it more to the yellow side or is it more to the red side? And you have to make that determination for each spot, because some areas of Larry's face, you know, this guy we're painting from, some areas are more yellow and some are more reddish orangish. For example, this area right here is more of to the yellowish side. This area here is more to the reddish side. As we go down here, we've got some kind of reddish skin tones just in this spot here on his neck. But over here, this is not as red. That's kind of more of a brownish, beige, tan yellow color. It doesn't have as much red. It's got more yellow in it, but it's not vibrant yellow. It's more muted. So you really want to make those determinations in each spot. You ask yourself, is this red? Is it more to the red side? Is it more to the yellow side? And then if you determine, okay, it's more to the yellow side, you ask yourself, is it a vibrant yellow or is it more of a subdued yellow? So if it's more of a subdued yellow, you're not going to use a bright color like Indian yellow, cadmium yellow. Instead, you're going to use something like raw sienna, which is a more subdued version, less vibrant version of yellow. And then even less vibrant than raw sienna would be raw umber. Okay, so these things will take time to learn, but the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And you guys are really doing a great job. Like some people just starting doing their first portrait, I'm amazed at how good they are. All right. Malika says, can you work with warm and cool glazes? Yep, but just like I answered before, make sure you know whether they're red or yellow, and if they're cool, whether they're green or blue or purple. You have to make that determination. It's not enough just to say this is cool and this is warm. That works in the beginning stages of the portrait, but it doesn't work as well later on. Mary says the glazes can make the surface too smooth so they don't take paint properly. Can that be corrected? Yeah, it can be corrected, but the better thing would be to not have that happen in the first place. You want to make sure your glazes are mixed with a lot of matte medium, that the paint is very, very fluid, very thin. And you know, if you're using a heavy body paint, you might be encountering that more, where it starts to fill in the texture of the canvas, or if you're over brushing it, then that will also start to fill in that texture of the canvas. If you keep the paint very fluid and you brush it rapidly, it won't happen. So the better thing is to not have it happen in the first place. Once it does happen, you really can't scrape the paint off. I mean, you can scrape off little bits, little globs, like if you have a piece of dried paint in there or some dust that's a large particle, you can scrape it off and that's not going to be a big issue. But visually, if you try to scrape off layers, I know some people have done that, but I don't recommend it. It could really cause problems with your paint, creating texture that you don't want, and you have to try to fill it in. So visually you can correct it, but you're not going to be able to correct the texture. I mean, you're just going to have to live with that texture, and that's okay. You know, because there's some people that paint portraits and you literally can see the gobs of paint. I mean, that's just the way it's more of an impressionistic look. Excuse me, but you can really see like those globs of paint on their canvas. So you can see it, and you can see all their brush work, you can touch their brush work, you can feel it. And so if you have that to some degree, it's not terrible, because people will then know this is not a photograph, this is a painting. So I think that can work out. But as far as like trying to paint glazes on top of areas of the canvas that are smooth and some that are more rough, that have the pitted surface of the canvas, you know, you're just going to have to use very precise brush work, use a smaller brush, and really try to control what you do on top of those areas. I hope that helps. Jamie says, I seem like I've missed a few steps along the way. How can I prepare for lesson number 8? Yeah, so Jamie, I'd have to see your portrait to advise, and a lot of people have been asking, you know, emailing me and messaging me for specific help in their portraits, and I wish I could get to everybody. It's just not physically possible with the amount of people that have been contacting me. I will say this, that when you're all-access member, you're an all-access member at Realistic Acrylic Portrait School, then I do those personal critiques where I do the side-by-side version of your painting on the reference photo, excuse me, the reference photo on the left, your painting on the right, and I compare and contrast and specifically show you what to correct, and it's a great way to get feedback. I'm just going to mention it here just as a possibility for you in the future. I have tried to get back to people when they've emailed me as well. I just can't get back to everyone. But if you shoot me an email and my schedule opens up where I have a little bit of time, I'd be happy to give you some specific guidance on that, Jamie. But I would have to see your painting to advise you. I will say this though, make sure you go through all the lessons and watch anything again that you might have missed. But yeah, shoot me an email if you can. Debbie says, I'm having problems finding your bonus videos. Yeah, so Not all of my bonus videos are going to be posted, Debbie. This painting, not this one behind me, this was a fast one, but the actual painting that I'm doing, you know, for this class right here, that one. That one is going to take probably over 20 hours for me to properly finish it. And so the class can't get to be 20 hours long. It's just too much recording time and too much for people to watch. And really too much for me and my schedule to record and edit and upload and post and all that stuff. So I had to make a determination to try to hit the highlights in each step and say, okay, I'm going to cover really each critical juncture of painting, each critical area where the painting shifts over, and certain techniques and different aspects that I'd like you to be aware of, and try to cover as much as I can within about 10 hours, because each class is somewhere about an hour long. Some are a little less, some are a little more. So the bonus videos, kind of bridging the gap between some of the later lessons, I'm posting them to Realistic Acrylic All Access. So I'll talk about more about that later at the end of the challenge, and officially open that up and give you guys an invitation to join that if you'd like. But that's where all the videos are going to be posted at. So it's probably going to be, I'd say 10 hours worth of videos, and they're going to be segmented so you can skip and hop around and find just the things that you want, so you don't have to like wade through so much time trying to digest 10 more hours of video. I can't do that on YouTube. They just don't have the format for that. But I host my courses at teachable.com, and they have a super great format where all the lessons are laid out step by step, and you can click excuse me, on each video, and you can hop around with the course menu on the left hand side, and you can access everything, you know, wherever you want it. So you might say, I want to work on skin tones. You scroll down, you find skin tones, you click that. Or you might say, I want to skip ahead to the next lesson. I want to skip ahead to values, or whatever it might be. And you can hop around anywhere. And there's some people in this group that have taken my courses. They're members of All Access. They can let you know more about how it works. But it's just a fantastic way to learn. And that's where my videos are going to be posted. So that's the long-winded answer to your question there. All right, just starting to lose my voice just a bit. I got to get some water quick. Excuse me just a second. Okay, that's much better. Okay, Mary says, different reds are sunburn and shadows in camera area. We were in Mexico. Oh, okay. So like literally on Larry's face, on your husband's face, the one we're painting from, he actually did have some sunburn. So that's good to know. So people are painting this red and saying it's too red, but maybe it's not as red as we think. Maybe it actually is that sunburn, because his neck did look a little red. Well, that makes sense then. There we go. So it's okay to have your portraits be a little red. Now we don't want them just crazy red, right? But if they're a little bit red, well, that's how it is. All right, Emily. Emily says, I love the photo. Hope he's enjoying this process. Yeah, he's going to be famous. Larry's going to be famous. All right. Okay, we got some good comments here. Wendy says, where did you get the tubes that you refill with paint? Yeah, good question. So, these tubes right here, to show it really quick. Sorry about that. You're seeing my hand covered with paint. These tubes right here, they're called Coughlin's squeezable tubes. Coughlin's squeezable tubes, okay? And I got these at a place called rei.com. They sell camping supplies, rei.com. And you could probably find it at some other places as well that send camping supplies. Those are literally tubes that you would use for, probably could use for ketchup and mustard, but you could also use it for like shampoo and different things like that. That's really what they're for. And what's cool about these tubes is they open up. So you take this crimp off on the top, you just slide it off, you just pull it away, and you can literally open that up and you can pour your paint into it and refill it. And since I buy my paint from Nova Color, they don't sell it in tubes, they sell it in these big jars or jugs. and then you have to scoop it out with a spoon, and it's just a messy process. I mean, I hated the process so much of applying paint to my palette that it actually made me some days not want to paint. And I'm like, I don't want to feel like that, where I hate to paint because I hate getting all messy adding paint with the spoon to the palette, and it's just annoying. So I looked for squeezable refillable tubes, and I found these Coughlin tubes, these squeezable tubes. They're fantastic. And I think they're just a few bucks a piece. They're well worth it. You can use them. I've had mine for like 3 years and they work great. So, all right, any other questions? Godfrey says, another helpful video. Thanks. Wendy says, very familiar with REI. Thanks. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, well, if you have any other questions, go ahead and post them really quick. Hey, if I missed anything, if there's something I didn't cover in this lesson that I didn't make clear, would you let me know? I'll be happy to address it. Otherwise, if I did cover these questions for you, how to fix blotchy glazes and skin tones that are off, give me a thumbs up. Let me know that this video is helpful for you. That encourages me to keep making videos like this for you. And I want to get better at teaching, and your feedback really, really helps. I'm just so enthused and so happy to see all the people painting, the portraits, the stories. I've had people email me, and then you guys are encouraging each other and, you know, just giving each other compliments, and you're blessing other people, they're blessing you. This is just a great thing. So again, thank you so much for taking part in this challenge. We're almost there. We've got one lesson to go. I hope to get that out to you this Saturday. That's the goal, and have this painting finished up, Lord willing. And if not, I'll push it out to the beginning of next week, but I'm shooting for this Saturday. But we'll finish this painting up together, and I'm here for you to help you out. Again, I'll be looking at my email, trying to see if I can help some of you out individually, but thank you so much. And I'm just going to scroll through some of the comments. Patty says thank you. Marcia says very helpful. Sharon says thank you for all you do from us. Mary says great helpful video. Francis, thank you for the time sharing your expertise. And Malika says, okay, is this teaching us to set values or depth? And I would say both. This is to correct skin tones and values and blotchy application of paint. Trudy says, you're already such a good painter, no hurry. Okay, so thank you for all the comments. I really appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much. Kathy says, this helped a lot. I'm going to do corrections before watching lesson 7. Thanks. Alfred says, thanks. Okay, thank you. Just trying to see if I missed any questions, because I want to make sure I'm teaching you everything I can. But it looks like I covered it all, and I know, hey, there's going to be more questions. And I can do this particular lesson of smoothing out blotchy glazes and adjusting skin tones. We can do this again, and hopefully I can teach it in an even clearer way in future lessons for you. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to teach you. God bless you all. May the Lord richly bless you in your painting and in your lives, keep you safe and healthy. Take care, God bless you, love you, and we'll talk to you soon.